The form had 47 fields. Davin Crew filled all 47 of them correctly, or thought he did, because he was the kind of person who read instructions and then reread them, and had been since the 3rd grade when a wrong answer on a standardized test had cost him entry to the regional math competition, and he had decided at 8 years old that the cost of careless reading was simply too high to pay. The lesson had stuck in the particular way lessons stick when they arrive attached to a specific, humiliating memory. He was 34 now, and the memory had faded, but the habit remained, embedded in him like a stratum, invisible, load-bearing, always there. So he read the Interstellar Civilian Exchange Program intake form twice before submitting it, caught his own error in field 22. He had initially typed his home station as *Kellen 3 instead of Kellen 3 *. One letter, enormous difference to a routing algorithm. Noticed a potential ambiguity in field 39 that turned out not to matter. Confirmed his contact information in fields 40 through 44. And submitted the corrected version with 40 minutes to spare before the midnight deadline. He made a cup of tea. He went to sleep. The error was not in any of the 47 fields. The error was in field 48, which did not visibly exist. It was a metadata tag, a classification flag auto-populated by the station's intake system when a submission was received, and what it was supposed to do was read his profession code, CE7, Civilian Environmental Surveyor, roughly equivalent to a planetary conditions analyst, a job that involved a great deal of walking in uncomfortable terrain and filling out observation logs about what he found there, and sort him into the appropriate exchange cohort. Cohort 7. Civilian Technical Specialists. He had checked. Cohort 7 was scheduled to be placed with a habitat development project on a temperate moon with interesting geological formations. He had been looking forward to it. What field 48 actually did, due to a software patch applied 4 hours before his submission that had not been tested against legacy profession codes from the pre-unification classification system, was read his profession code as RE7 *. Rescue and Emergency, Grade 7, Senior Field Operative. The confirmation message arrived at 47 and said, in its clipped bureaucratic way, that Davin Crew had been successfully registered for the 6th Cohort Interstellar Exchange, and that his placement, the Galactic Search and Rescue Rapid Response Unit, Outpost 14, Dinara 7, was confirmed pending medical clearance, and that transport would depart from Bay 11 in 17 days, and that he should familiarize himself with the enclosed unit briefing materials, and that the program wished him a productive and rewarding exchange experience. Davin read the confirmation 3 times. Then he read the enclosed briefing materials. The Galactic Search and Rescue Rapid Response Unit, Outpost 14, was a 7-person alien unit stationed in a high-risk geological zone on a world with significant canyon, cave, and seismic activity. They handled missing persons, structural collapses, environmental emergencies, and medical extractions in terrain that other rescue services would not or could not access. Their success rate was, he noticed, substantially higher than the regional average. Their commanding officer had been decorated 4 times. He considered briefly contacting the program to report the error. Then he packed his survey kit, his atmospheric measurement instruments, his geological analysis software, and his extensive collection of field notebooks, and he did not contact the program, because the placement sounded significantly more interesting than a habitat development project, and 17 days was not enough time for an administrative correction anyway, and the confirmation had already been processed. He brought his planetary conditions measurement kit. He was optimistic about its potential applications in a rescue context. He knew something was wrong the moment the shuttle bay doors opened on Outpost 14. Not because of the outpost itself. The outpost was exactly what the briefing materials had led him to expect. A compact, well-organized installation built into the face of a plateau, all reinforced composites and emergency orange exterior markings, and the kind of functional geometry that had sacrificed every unnecessary aesthetic consideration in pursuit of structural integrity. The plateau itself was a geological formation of considerable interest. He could see from the shuttle ramp that the exposed face had at least 3 distinct strata layers, the lowest of which had the particular dark banding associated with high-pressure tectonic formation, and the plateau extended back into a ridge system that the briefing materials had noted was composed largely of porous limestone with an unusually complex subsurface drainage pattern. He was already forming questions. He knew something was wrong because of the 7 figures waiting at the base of the ramp. They were all tall. The shortest of them stood at least a head above him, and Davin was not a short man. They wore the unit's rescue overalls in deep emergency orange with reflective silver seams, designed for visibility in adverse conditions, and most of them had their hoods down because the weather on Dinara 7 was currently mild. They were all looking at him with expressions that were professionally controlled and nonetheless communicating, collectively, that the information their data pads contained about the person now walking down this ramp was experiencing some significant failure to match the person actually walking down the ramp. The one at the front was tallest of all of them. She had the straight-backed posture of someone for whom a correct physical bearing had become so habitual it was no longer effort. Her skin was the dark, warm bronze of polished ironwood, a color that caught the plateau's afternoon light differently from every angle, and her hair was an unbroken fall of copper-silver that she had braided back from her face with the efficiency of someone who had thoroughly made peace with the logistical reality of having long hair in emergency conditions. Her eyes were double-ringed, inner amber and outer pale gold, and they were performing what he would later come to recognize as her professional assessment mode, taking in information, running it against existing data, arriving at a conclusion she was not yet sharing. She was holding a data pad at her side the way someone holds a data pad when they have already read everything on it, and are now looking at the situation the data pad has failed to adequately explain. Davin Crew, she said, not a question. She had read the data pad. Yes, he said. She looked at him. He was wearing civilian hiking trousers in a durable synthetic weave, a thermal underlayer, and a gray field jacket with a considerable number of pockets, all of which were full. He was carrying a survey pack, more pockets, several of which were also full. He noticed now, made a series of packing choices that made a great deal of sense for a planetary environmental surveyor, and considerably less sense for a Grade 7 rescue operative. And the 7 alien women in front of him appeared to be arriving at this same conclusion simultaneously. Your registration file, she said, with a very precise economy of words, lists your professional grade as RE7. There may have been a registration error, Davin said. The 7 alien women exchanged a look. It was a very fast look, practiced and coordinated, the kind of look that happened among people who had worked together long enough that they had developed a shorthand for complex collective emotional states. It covered a great deal of ground in approximately 1.5 seconds. What is your actual profession? The woman at the front said. Environmental Surveyor, CE7 Kellen 3 Station. Planetary Surface Conditions Assessment, Habitability Analysis, Resource Access Evaluation, Geological Risk Mapping. I've done some emergency response adjacent work, incidentally first on scene at 2 industrial accidents and a cave collapse, completed a standard casualty care course 3 years ago. He paused, because this seemed relevant to establish clearly. I have no formal rescue operations training. Another pass of the fast look. He registered it as significant data and said nothing. I'm Serivel Ameth and Dinara, the woman at the front said. Unit Commander. She introduced the team in order, each with their specialization, the introduction delivered in the clipped way of someone for whom operational introductions had been compressed down to the essential facts. Yavith, Forensic Tracking, copper-skinned with white-streaked locks pulled efficiently back. Krell, structural assessment, dark ink black with gold bioluminescent freckles across her forehead that caught the light when she moved. Tyern, medical officer, red-skinned, her healer's kit worn with the natural ease of someone who had been carrying it long enough that it no longer registered as separate from herself. Len, communications and navigation, nearly identical to Tyern except for a pale scar along her left jaw and a subtly different manner of holding still. Phi, environmental specialist, pale greenish-silver like shallow water over pale stone. She looked at Davin's measurement kit with the expression of someone encountering an object in an unexpected context and computing its implications. And Quell, junior field operative dark indigo, the youngest of them, with a habit of direct eye contact so consistent that he would later decide it was either a cultural practice or a deliberate personal choice. And either way he respected it. "You shouldn't be here," Amath said. "It was not cruel. It was simply accurate, delivered in the register of someone who states available facts." "I know," he said. "The administrative correction will take 6 to 8 weeks to process. The program confirms this." She looked at her data pad. "You can wait out the placement period in the outpost auxiliary quarters. There are 4 rooms available. The facilities are functional. You will not be included in operational deployments. You are not trained and the liability framework does not accommodate unqualified personnel in active rescue contexts." She paused. "This is not a judgment of your capabilities. It is a structural constraint." Davin looked at the outpost. He looked at the plateau rising behind it, the interesting geological formation, the 3 strata layers, the ridge system beyond. He looked at the team, who had resumed the fast look at a lower frequency but had not stopped performing it entirely. "Could I work?" he said. "I won't get in the way of operations. But I have a measurement kit and 17 years of geological field experience, and I'm going to be here 6 to 8 weeks regardless. Sitting in a room seems," he looked for the right word, "wasteful." Amath studied him. The amber gold rings of her eyes were, he noted, equipped with a very particular quality of attention. He added this to a nascent set of observations. "We'll see," she said. The first week, he stayed out of the way. This was not difficult, because the unit had 3 active cases running simultaneously. A missing survey team on a ridgeline to the east, a structural collapse at a mining installation to the north that was generating fresh complications every 12 hours, and a localized atmospheric event that had grounded 2 civilian transports and stranded their passengers at an exposed way station. Amath ran her team with the quiet efficiency of someone for whom the management of simultaneous complex situations had long since ceased to require conscious effort. The choreography had become instinct. He watched the briefings he was allowed to observe, which were the site assessment and terrain analysis phases where his presence created no liability, and stayed out of the briefings that were operational planning, and ate in the common area during the windows when someone was always in and out of the kitchen anyway, and spent his free hours in the plateau's afternoon light doing what he did when there was interesting geology in front of him, documenting it. By day 8 he had produced an 11-page site analysis of the plateau and the ridge system behind it. He had not been asked to produce it, but the data was there, and the patterns were there, and stopping before he understood what he was looking at was not something he had ever been particularly good at. He gave it to Phi because Phi was the environmental specialist, and it seemed more relevant to her than to anyone else. Phi read it standing in the corridor outside the equipment bay, which was where she had been when he found her. She read the first 4 pages, looked up at him with an expression he could not read precisely, read 3 pages again from the beginning, and then took it and went down the corridor without telling him where she was going. He went back to the analysis room. He was in the middle of breakfast the next morning when Amath came and sat across the table from him. She set the printed analysis between them on the table. "You mapped the subsurface drainage network," she said. The plateau has an unusual drainage pattern, Davin said. He leaned forward slightly because this was a subject of genuine interest to him, and he had been working on explaining it to himself for 3 days. The surface strata suggests the water table is sitting about 4 meters lower than what the standard regional survey assumes. The standard survey used a calibration model developed for consolidated sandstone formations, and this plateau is a limestone shale composite. The drainage behavior is structurally different. The water doesn't pool, it channels. It means the soil-bearing capacity shifts significantly once you account for the actual table depth, and any foundation work done on standard survey data would be operating with incorrect load assumptions. He paused. I thought it might be useful to structural assessments. That's why I gave it to Phi. Amath looked at the analysis. She looked at the page 7 section she had marked with a small notation in what appeared to be a shorthand he hadn't seen before. The mining collapse, she said, the east wing. I don't know the specifics of the mining collapse, he said carefully. I haven't been included in those briefings, and I understand why. But if the installation was built on standard survey data for this region, then the foundation calculations would be off by the same margin. She was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet he was beginning to note that meant she was running something. She set the analysis on the table with the same care she would give a deployment map. The east wing has not responded to 3 stabilization attempts, she said. Standard compaction protocol, nothing has held. Is it on the eastern slope of the ridge line? She looked at him. Yes. Page 7, he said. There's a clay lens at approximately 3 meters on the eastern slope. It's not in the standard survey. I found it in the raw geological core samples from the regional database. They're available on the station archive. Clay lens retains water. The bearing wall isn't settling because of compaction failure. It's settling because of lateral water migration under the foundation. Compaction protocol addresses the wrong problem. You'd need lateral drainage installed before any stabilization will hold. Amath picked up the analysis. She read page 7. She picked up her data pad and opened a site plan that he had not seen before, the mining installation, the foundation grid, the east wing. She compared the site plan to his page 7 annotation for approximately 45 seconds. Then she went to the communications room without saying anything further. He refilled his tea and went back to breakfast. By that evening, the east wing was stable. Krell came back from the site at 1840 and found him in the common area reading. She stood in the doorway with her forehead freckles pulsing in a pattern he had been cataloging for 5 days and had not yet fully understood. She looked at him the way she looked at structural problems, trying to see what was underneath. You did that, she said. The geology did that, Davin said. I just understood what the geology was saying. That is, Krell said after a pause, a distinction without a practical difference. She sat down across from him. She looked at the notebook on the table beside him, the one with his outpost observations, which he had not been fast enough to close. She tilted her head in the particular way he had noted was her habit when she encountered unexpected data. Those are notes about us, she said. Observational notes, he said. I'm a surveyor, I observe things. I didn't mean for anyone to read them. She looked at them more carefully, and he made no move to close the notebook because she had already seen them, and it seemed like the worst option was to be evasive about it now. The notes were not critical. They were the same structured observation format he used for geological strata and atmospheric readings. Precise, factual, non-judgmental. Commander Amath, decision cycle approx. 40 min for major deployment planning, under 3 min for reactive mid-operation. Consultation pattern is specialist by domain, Yavith tracking, Krell structure, Tyern medical, Phi environmental, Len comms. Then decides alone. Does not appear to weight hierarchy differently based on seniority. Quell's ground-level reports receive same analytical attention as senior specialist assessments. Outer gold I-ring contracts when she is waiting for information she has not yet received. First observed day 4, confirmed days 5, 7. Krell, bioluminescent forehead markings pulse at a frequency that appears correlated with emotional state, faster and brighter during active structural problem solving, slower during rest or routine work. Hypothetically, a threat assessment function, but also activates during positive engagement. Needs more data. Krell read further. He watched her read without interrupting. Your previous external assessment team, he said eventually, what did they report? Krell looked up. They produced a 40-page report that described the unit as administratively capable with strong field execution metrics, and recommended we adopt a standardized pre-deployment checklist system we were already using. That seems, Davin said carefully, like 40 pages of not very much. It was, Krell said, 40 pages of not very much. Yes. She looked back at the notebook. These are not 40 pages of not very much. They're not a report, he said. I'm not assessing you, I just notice things, it's how I work. What do you notice about the clay lens? She said. The clay lens on the eastern slope. No, she leaned forward slightly. The clay lens in how we work, if you've been watching us for a week. He looked at her. He thought about what he would say if someone asked him to describe a geological formation he had been studying for 7 days. Not its measurements, not its classifications, but what it was. You're very good, he said. Better than your case records suggest, and your case records are already strong. The gap is in site assessment data. You're making excellent decisions with information that is systematically less complete than it should be, because the regional geological surveys for this zone are calibrated incorrectly. You've been compensating for bad data by increasing operational caution margins, which is the right response, but it costs you time and sometimes creates risk of its own. If the data were accurate, your margins would be correct and you'd have more latitude on extractions. He paused. I've been looking at the survey data since day 3. Krell was very still. Her forehead markings were at the brighter end of the frequency range. She left and came back 20 minutes later with Yaveth, who sat down without preamble and said, Tell me what you think about the Vithrin Ridge retrieval, 2231, June. He told her. He had read that after-action report on day 6. Yaveth asked 3 follow-up questions, precise and tracking specialist in their approach. She was testing the perimeter of what he knew, he understood, looking for the edges. He answered all 3, and then answered the 4th question, the one she had not asked, but that was the logical follow-on from the 3rd. Yaveth looked at him for a moment. Then she left without saying anything, which he had come to understand in 7 days, was how this unit processed significant new information. It went somewhere quiet and calculated. Ameth said nothing to him about any of this directly. But on day 14 she showed him the outpost's complete terrain database, the full archive, raw files included, and told him, with the economy of someone who had already decided and was now simply communicating the decision, that he had clearance to run a full data audit if he wanted one. He wanted one. He was included in site assessment briefings from week 2 onward. Not operational planning. Ameth kept that line clear, and he respected it, because the line existed for good reasons that he did not need explained. But the terrain and atmospheric analysis phases, yes. The geological risk evaluations that were his professional specialty appearing in rescue-relevant clothing. He sat at the end of the table and contributed when he had something to contribute, and did not contribute when he didn't, which was, he suspected, a rarer quality than it should have been in briefing rooms, and he noticed the fast look frequency decreasing around his contributions over the course of 10 days from approximately every 12 seconds to approximately every 40. Phi came to his quarters on day 11 with 3 separate geological anomaly reports from previous missions, held with the careful manner of someone carrying things they consider important. "I've been looking at these for 2 years," she said. "Something is wrong with them. I can't identify what." He looked at them. The first had an atmospheric pressure anomaly that was probably a sensor error of a specific, identifiable type. The third had a terrain stability question he would want more raw data to answer. He read the second twice, then looked at the site coordinates, then pulled up the raw survey data from the regional archive on the room's terminal. "Here," he said, "field 19 of the raw survey input. The notation for soil density in this zone uses 2 units that are visually similar in the pre-unification classification system. The surveyor used one where they meant the other. The density reading is off by a factor of 3.2. That's why the risk classification came in 3 grades too low." He showed her the original notation and the corrected one side by side. Fi looked at the display for a long time. Then she said, very quietly, "The near miss in that after-action report." "Would not have been a near miss with accurate data," he said. "Yes." She left with the 3 reports and came back 2 days later with 7 more. He worked through them methodically, identifying 3 survey notation errors of the same type, 2 calibration issues of a related but distinct variety, and 1 measurement that appeared correct but had been input into the wrong field entirely, shifting its significance by an order of magnitude. "How many of our operational decisions have been made on data this compromised?" Fi asked. "I'm working on that," he said. "That's what the data audit is for." She looked at the audit in progress on the terminal. It was currently at day 3 of what he estimated was a 3-week project. "Can I help?" she said. He showed her the methodology. She learned it in an afternoon. From day 14 onward, she came to the analysis room most evenings, and they worked through archive sections in parallel, each checking the other's anomaly identifications, and the audit went faster, and the pattern that was emerging from it was increasingly clear and increasingly troubling. Amath began to appear in the briefing room doorway during the site assessment sessions with a different quality of attention. He would not have said she had not been paying attention before, because she paid attention to everything. It appeared to be structurally built in, but there was a different weight to it now. When he spoke, she was less likely to look at her data pad. He noted this and did not remark on it. On day 19, the unit deployed at 6:30 on a complex extraction. 2 missing hikers in a cave system to the south that had a documented 3-entry point structure, and a less documented additional passage network that a recreational survey had flagged as possible but not mapped. The briefing was operational. He was not in it. He was in the analysis room with a section of the data audit that had a complicated thread he was close to the end of. He heard the unit move. The briefing room, equipment bays, shuttle bay, the transport lifting, the outpost going quiet around him in the particular way it went quiet when everyone capable of movement was somewhere else. He kept working. Len was on communications duty. He could hear, distantly, the channel open and active, the texture of voices he couldn't make out but could identify by cadence. At 1100, Len appeared in the doorway. "Are you planning to eat?" she said. He looked up. He had not had breakfast. He looked at the time and discovered it was further into the morning than he had understood it to be. "I'll make something," he said. "I've been on the channel since 500, Len said. "I haven't eaten either." He made food. Not from strategy, from the basic logic of asterisk, 2 people in a building who haven't eaten should eat, and one of them is occupied with something important. He found the outpost kitchen in the functional state of a kitchen used by people with variable schedules and consistent appetite, and made a meal that was adequate and warm and present. He brought it to the communications room. Len ate with one hand and kept the channel open with the other and didn't say anything about it, which he took to mean she was either not surprised or had decided not to comment. The unit came back at 1800. He was in the common area with a second meal again, from basic logic, and the conversation when they came in was the conversation of people debriefing an operation, not directed at him, covering detail he did not have full context for. He followed the parts he could follow and let the rest go by. Yavith came in first, looked at the food, looked at him, performed a version of the fast look that was slower and more searching. "You made food," she said. "There were ingredients," he said. "It seemed like the right time for it." "It was Quell's turn," Yavith said. "I know," Quell said, from across the room where she was removing her equipment. "I would have made something." She looked at Davin. "But this is better than what I would have made." He was not sure this was true, but he received it as offered. Ameth came in last. She had been on a rope descent. He had gathered from the channel fragments he'd heard through the communications room, and she had the contained tiredness of someone who had been very precisely focused for an extended period, and was now in the first minutes of no longer needing to be. She looked at the food. She sat down. "Thank you," she said, not performatively. The way someone says thank you when they mean it and don't have room for more than that. He said, "Of course," because it was the right response and he meant it, and the meal proceeded with the fast look occurring at a frequency he was still trying to map accurately. On day 23, Phi cleared 3 hours from her schedule and asked him to sit down and explain his full methodology for reading atmospheric data through geological structures. She had a data pad and a stylus, and the expression of someone who intended to actually learn something rather than just gather material. He explained it from the beginning, which took longer than he expected because Phi had very good questions, the kind that identified gaps in his explanation before they became assumptions he had left unspoken, and the session extended from its planned 3 hours to nearly 5, by which point they had covered the theoretical basis, the measurement approach, the calibration corrections required for limestone-dominant zones specifically, and 2 case studies from his previous work on other worlds. At the end, Phi set the data pad down. "You are," she said, "genuinely wasted as an environmental surveyor." "I like environmental surveying," he said. "The geology is always different." "You're still wasted." She picked the data pad up again. "The methodology you've developed for reading atmospheric signature through geological structure, we don't have this. The standard training doesn't cover it at this level. We've been losing time on at least 4 deployment categories because we don't have this." "I could write it up," he said. "Yes," she said, "you could." A pause. "Ameth is going to offer you something at the end of the exchange period. I'm telling you in advance. I'm not authorized to tell you what it is, but I'm telling you it's coming so you're not surprised when it does." "How do you know?" "She spoke with Krell and Yavith," Phi said. "I was in the equipment room. The door was open and I was there for 20 minutes before they began and I did not feel the need to leave." She looked at him steadily. The discussion lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Ameth does not spend 4 minutes on things she's uncertain about. He put this information somewhere he could find it again and went back to the data audit, which was now on day 16, and producing results he was increasingly confident were both accurate and significant. On day 25, Quell found him in the analysis room at an hour he would later concede was not a reasonable hour to be in an analysis room, doing nothing in particular, not working, not sleeping, just sitting with the terminal dark in front of him and the observation window showing the plateau in late afternoon shadow. He had been thinking about the 4. He had been thinking about them since the day he had found the calibration error's impact calculation, the 4 outcomes that would have been different with accurate data. And he had been doing this quietly, without it affecting his work or his meals or his conversations, in the way that certain findings settle into you and require some processing before they become simply known things rather than new things. Quell sat down across from him without asking. She looked at the dark terminal. She looked at him. "The 4," she said. He looked at her. Ameth told us, she said. After the Geological Authority responded, she told us what the audit found. She looked at the terminal again. I've been thinking about the 4. So have I, he said. We all have. She was quiet for a moment. Krell was on 2 of those missions. She's been in the equipment bay every evening this week going through the gear lists. That's what she does when something is wrong. She checks the physical things she can actually verify. Yaveth ran the tracking records from both her missions 3 days in a row. Phi spent a full day rereading your methodology documentation. A pause. Tyrant-baked things. We ate them. They were not good, but we ate them. He looked at her. Quell had the quality, rare in his experience, of saying exactly what was true and no more and no less. What do, he said, when something is wrong? I ask questions, she said, directly to the person. She looked at him with the full direct eye contact habit. The 4 outcomes are not your fault. You found the error. You've spent 3 weeks documenting it so it can be corrected. That's what you did with the information. I know, he said. I don't think you fully know, she said. I think you know it as a fact and are still working on knowing it as a true thing. He was quiet for a moment. He had been a surveyor for 17 years, and surveyors spent a great deal of time in terrain that was indifferent to them, and had developed, across those 17 years, a functional relationship with findings that were difficult, the resource deposit too deep to be useful, the geological formation too unstable for the proposed structure, the atmospheric reading that meant the mission had to turn back. The findings were what they were. You documented them accurately, and you moved to what could be done. I know it as a true thing, he said. I'm just finishing the processing. Quell looked at him for a moment. Then she said, with the matter-of-fact directness that was her consistent register, Ameth processed it in 1 night. After she read the full audit, she was in her quarters with the door closed for 3 hours, and then she came out and had tea and drafted the first version of the authority report letter and asked me to review the communications channel logs for the affected missions. A pause. She asked me specifically, not Len, who usually handles communications review. Me, Quell looked at the window. I think she wanted someone who was going to be honest rather than careful. What did you find? He said. That the team performed correctly on all 4 missions with the information they had, she said. That in 3 of the 4, a correct geological data input would have changed the decision tree at a specific point before the adverse outcome. That in the 4th, the data error was 2 steps removed from the outcome and the causal chain is more complex. She paused. I gave her the analysis. She read it once and thanked me and filed it. He nodded. You gave her something she needed, Quell said. The analysis, yes, but also a reason. She tilted her head slightly. She has been doing this work for 12 years. She is very good at it. She has also been making decisions on data that was incorrect for 11 of those 12 years, and she didn't know, and she's the kind of person who considers what she didn't know to be her responsibility regardless. A pause. Now she knows, and there's something she can do about it. That matters. He thought about this. The sessions in the analysis room, Quell said. The 220 sessions. He looked at her. I'm not being indirect, she said, with the quality of someone who is constitutionally unable to be indirect. I'm telling you that she doesn't stay up until 5:30 for geological data. She stays up until 5:30 for the same reason you're sitting in a dark room at 17:30 thinking about the 4, because some things you process better alongside someone else than alone. She looked at him steadily. She processes things alongside you. That's worth knowing. He sat with this for a moment. Thank you, he said. You're welcome, Quell said, with the directness she brought to that also. She got up to leave, then stopped in the doorway. There's food in the common area. I made it this time. It's not very good, but it's there. He went and ate it. She was right that it was not very good. He told her so, and she received this with the equanimity of someone who knows her limitations and has made peace with them. On day 27, Ameth found him in the analysis room at 2:17. She had not slept. He could see that, though she carried the not sleeping with the controlled steadiness of someone who had made a decision about how the evening was going to go and was simply executing it. She was in what he had come to recognize as her off-duty state. The unit overalls exchanged for a civilian underlayer and a jacket, her copper-silver hair down from the braid, which he had only seen twice before, both times late in the evening when the outpost was quiet. She appeared in the doorway and looked at him, and then at the 3 monitors of the data audit in progress, and then at him again. "Show me," she said. He showed her the thread, not the full audit, which was still 4 days from completion, but the shape of what he was finding. The systematic calibration error. The way it had been introduced 11 years ago when a regional survey update had failed to account for the specific geological character of this zone, and the way it had been propagating invisibly through every survey, every site assessment, every foundation study, every geological risk evaluation conducted in this region since. She watched as he walked through it. She asked 2 questions, both specific, both directed at the structural assumptions rather than the conclusions. He answered them. "How many missions affected?" she said. He pulled up the preliminary impact analysis. 43 that I can identify with high confidence. Of those, 31 proceeded without adverse outcome. The team's operational margins absorbed the data error. 8 had documented near-miss events. 4 had outcomes I would classify as, he chose his words, avoidable, meaning the outcome would have been different with accurate input data. She was quiet for a long time. The analysis room's monitors ran their silent cycles. Outside, the plateau was dark, the ridge system a shape against the stars. 4, she said. The error was in the calibration standard, not in your team's decision-making. Your team made correct decisions with the data available to them. The data was wrong. That doesn't change what happened to the 4. No, he said. It doesn't. She looked at the display for a long time. The outer gold rings of her eyes were doing the contraction he had cataloged on day 4, the pattern that meant she was waiting for information that had not arrived yet. But the information had arrived. This was it, on the monitors in front of her. The wait was over. The Regional Geological Authority needs this, she said. I know. I've been drafting the report in parallel. It's not finished. I want the full audit complete before I submit it, so the data is comprehensive, but the core finding is ready. How long? 4 days for the full audit. The report can go out within 2 days of that. She looked at the monitors again. He could see her reading the timeline display, the affected mission list, the calibration error documentation. I'll stay, she said. Show me the thread from the beginning. He showed her the thread from the beginning. She asked questions at the right intervals, not constant, not interrupting, but appearing when he arrived at a branch that had multiple possible interpretations, and each question identified exactly the branch that needed the most careful treatment. By 400, he understood that she read geological data the way she read operational situations, looking for what was not where it was expected to be. He noted this. He noted it in the part of his mind where he kept things he wanted to think about more carefully later. At 5:30, the audit thread reached its natural end for the evening. He had the shape of the final section. It would take 2 more sessions to complete. He leaned back in his chair. She went to the commander's kitchen and came back with 2 cups of the tea she kept there. Not the standard outpost supply, something else, richer and more complex, with a quality of warmth that was not just temperature. What is this? He said. Velakari pressed tea from the northern growing stations. She sat back down. The standard supply here is functional. He drank the tea. It tasted like warm stone and something floral and old. He thought about what kind of person brings their own tea to a posting on an austere rescue installation, and concluded it was the same kind of person who reads after-action reports from other commands and keeps a 4-minute decision cycle on complex questions. "Thank you," he said, "for staying." The thread was worth following, she said. This was, he was fairly sure, not only about the geological data, but he let it be only about the geological data, for now, because some things needed more data before they could be named correctly. The call came on day 31 at 11:47. He had been invited to the mission briefing, not as an observer but as a contributing resource, because the target site was a canyon system that his data audit had flagged 3 weeks earlier as having an anomalous subsurface profile that did not match its official geological classification. He was explaining the relevant features of the canyon floor when the outpost's alarm went. Red pulse, not amber. Major emergency. Active incident, different site, different direction. The briefing became a deployment in under 3 minutes. He stepped back and let the unit move. This was the arrangement. It was also the correct thing to do, and he did not struggle with it. What he did not know, until Len told him 23 minutes later with her communications officer expression at maximum containment, was that the deployment had involved a rapid rope descent at the Northern Canyon extraction site, and that one of the anchor bolts had failed, equipment fatigue. A failure mode the pre-mission check had not caught because the failure was internal and did not present visible indicators. And that the rope had dropped Ameth and Quell to the canyon floor, 60 meters below. Quell had landed on a debris shelf. She had a broken arm, compound fracture closed. She was conscious. Ameth had landed on the canyon floor. She was not responsive. "Tyron is on site," Len said, and the way she said it told him that this was the fact she was holding onto most firmly. They're with them, but the extraction. "What's the problem with the extraction?" he said. He said it the way he said things when a problem was in front of him that had a structure, and the structure needed to be found quickly. The canyon narrows 30 meters up from the floor. The standard extraction rigging cannot navigate the narrowing with a horizontal carry. The patient's body width exceeds the clearance in the narrow section. We need a vertical lift, but the canyon floor, the floor survey is showing no stable anchor point. The floor is reading as unstable across the full width. He moved to the communications terminal. "Show me the floor survey data." She pulled it up. He looked at it for 30 seconds. The floor survey is reading unstable because the sensor is calibrated for consolidated rock, and the canyon floor has a surface layer of loose sediment over bedrock, he said. The sediment is causing the sensor to read false positives for void space. Standard limestone over sediment signature. I've seen it 4 times in the audit. He pulled up the raw geological data for this sector from the regional archive. He had audited this data 3 weeks ago. He knew what was here. There is a bedrock shelf at this coordinate. He marked it on the display, sitting at approximately 1.8 meters below the current surface sediment. The shelf is load-bearing. If you clear the sediment at that point, it's loose. It would take 15 minutes with a survey brush and a hand tool. You have a stable anchor platform sufficient for a full vertical lift. Len was relaying before he finished. A pause. Then Krell's voice through the channel, clipped and controlled. "Can he verify shelf depth? Our ground sensors are rejecting readings." The sensors are rejecting readings for the same reason the floor survey came back unstable. Limestone resonance at that depth amplifies the signal, and the sensor reads it as noise. The shelf is at 1.8 meters, plus or minus 10 centimeters. Mark the anchor point 18 centimeters to the east of the sediment clearing center. There's a slight gradient on the shelf and east is uphill, so that's your highest load-bearing position. Another pause, the sound of the team moving. He stayed at the terminal with his hand near the controls in case more came back. Then the sound of a tool working against sediment. He tracked the time. 11 minutes and 40 seconds later, Krell said, "Shelf confirmed. Depth 1.79 meters. Anchor stable." He let out a breath he had not been holding particularly, obviously. The extraction took 22 minutes. He stayed at the communications terminal and tracked every update. building a mental model of the canyon from the data fragments coming back through the channel, ambient temperature, air quality, the tension readings from the extraction rig, the distance markers that told him the carry was progressing. He updated the geological risk assessment for the canyon site twice based on sensor readings that changed as the team moved, and relayed both updates through Len without being asked. And both times Krell confirmed the update aligned with what they were seeing and adjusted accordingly. When Amath's voice came through the channel, low and slightly rough, the voice of someone returning from somewhere they had not intended to go, asking where is Quell with the particular phrasing of someone whose first operational instinct on regaining consciousness is the status of her team, Len made a sound beside him that he would not try to catalog. He did not try to catalog it, he let it be what it was. He made food again that evening. He made it before they returned because he knew the approximate timing from the extraction progress, and he made more of it than usual because he had been in the communications room with Len for 3 hours, and he knew she had not eaten again, and he made the particular kind of food that was warm and substantial without requiring decision-making, because people who had been managing a crisis for 3 hours generally did not want to make decisions about food. The unit came back at 2040. Quell's arm was in a hard field cast, and she moved carefully around it with the efficiency of someone who had already been injured in the field before and knew how to work around it. Tyron had the controlled calm of a medical officer who had done something difficult and done it correctly, and was still processing the having done it. Krell's forehead markings were pulsing at the faster and brighter frequency. Yavith looked at Davin when she came in with the tracking specialist version of really looking at something, assessing what she was seeing, not just registering it. Amath came in last. She had a field seal on her forearm and was moving with the particular careful quality of someone with cracked ribs who had been told, probably correctly, to move with the particular careful quality of someone with cracked ribs. She looked at the food. She looked at him. She said nothing for a moment, then she said, "The anchor point." "The shelf was there," he said. "I'd audited that sector." "You knew where it was." "I knew where the geology said it should be. The sensor confirmed it." She sat down. The unit sat down. The meal happened with a texture that was different from the previous shared meals, quieter in a different way, the silence of people recalibrating around something. She was in the medical bay for 3 days. Tyron characterized this as asterisk significantly preferable to the alternative, which she said with the manner of someone for whom the alternative was not hypothetical. 2 cracked ribs, a moderate concussion, a sprained wrist. Amath characterized the medical bay stay as an administrative inconvenience, which she said with the manner of someone who understood perfectly well that Tyron was right and had made peace with 3 days. He went on the 2nd day with the completed data audit and the finished geological authority report. These were real things he needed to show her. He was not inventing a reason to visit. The distinction seemed important to establish clearly to himself. She was sitting up when he arrived. She had her data pad back, he gathered, from the manner in which Tyron appeared briefly in the doorway, looked at the data pad, looked at Davin, and then looked away with the expression of someone who has decided to not be currently having an opinion, that the data pad had been a negotiated outcome. He gave her the report. She read it. She asked 3 questions, all of them structural, going for the foundations rather than the surface. He answered them and she read the relevant sections again and asked a follow-up on the 3rd that he had anticipated and had the data prepared for. Then she set the data pad on her knee and looked at him. "The anchor point," she said again, "under field conditions in 4 minutes. Accurate to within 10 centimeters. The audit data was current," he said. "I'd been in that sector's records 3 weeks earlier. You were also monitoring the extraction channel for real-time updates and relaying 2 amended risk assessments while giving the anchor point coordinates." He did not know what to say to this, so he said nothing. Quell's arm is a straightforward fracture, she said. She'll be fully operational in 5 weeks. My ribs are, she moved fractionally, in the way of someone confirming that moving was not their preferred current activity. Present. Tyron is confident I'll be functional on a normal timeline. A pause. Tyron is almost always right. This is inconvenient when she tells me things I don't want to hear and very useful otherwise. He looked at her. She looked at him. The afternoon light from the medical bay's observation window was a specific warm quality that brought out the amber in the inner rings of her eyes. He had been cataloging her eye-ring states for 30 days and had most of them mapped. The current state was the one he had spent 2 days trying to categorize correctly and had finally understood 2 nights ago in the analysis room. "Fi told me she told you," she said. "About the consultation offer." "Yes." She looked at the data pad on her knee. It was going to be a formal approach at the end of the exchange period. The fall revised the timeline. She said this without particular apology, as a statement of operational fact. Regional geological consultant to the unit. Part-time, remote eligible, FEPR deployment. Pre-mission site assessment for canyon and cave deployments, and any site with an unusual subsurface profile. "I can do that," he said. "Yes." She looked at him with the full weight of her professional assessment mode, and underneath it, or alongside it, not underneath, the other thing, the eye-ring state he had finally mapped correctly. The Regional Geological Authority has already responded to the preliminary data from the report. They intend to update the calibration standard. They want to know who produced the analysis. "I'll respond to them," he said. "I know you will." A pause. "There's one additional element." He waited. "I would like to continue the analysis session," she said. "The 220 sessions, on a voluntary basis, outside the consultation arrangement, not part of it, when there's a thread that warrants following." He thought about the warm stone tea, the quality of her questions at the branch points, the way she had stayed until 5:30 without needing to explain why she was staying. "I'd like that," he said. "Yes." She nodded once, the nod of someone who has received an answer and is now filing it correctly. He was in the shuttle bay on day 42 with his pack at his feet when Ameth came to find him, and she did not come alone, which he registered as he registered everything precisely, and with the understanding that the fact of it was more data. The rest of the unit had arranged themselves in the shuttle bay with the practiced casualness of people who had decided to be somewhere without deciding to appear to have decided to be there. Yaveth had equipment to tend to. She had always had equipment to tend to. That was fine. Fi was reading something on her data pad, the pad held at an angle that looked natural if you didn't know her. Tyron and Len were in conversation, the conversation pausing at intervals for them to look elsewhere. Krell was against the equipment bay wall with the unhurried stance of someone who happened to be there. Quell was watching the door with her full direct eye contact habit and not trying to make it look like anything other than what it was, which was Quell's consistent approach to most things. Ameth stopped in front of him. She was in her unit overalls in the commander's configuration, hood down, copper-silver braid in place, the small unit lead designation at her collar. She was carrying a data pad. She held it out to him. "Third paragraph," she said. He read the 3rd paragraph. It was a section of what appeared to be an exchange program administrative document, a new document type he had not encountered before, labeled at the header as Extended In-Field Consultation Posting, Category 4, Technical Specialist Embedded Arrangement. The 3rd paragraph described the conditions of a 6-month renewable posting for qualified external technical specialists embedded with active field units, and the conditions were described in a number of carefully worded bullet points that covered scope of work, operational liability framework, professional classification, administrative oversight, and renewal criteria. The carefully worded bullet points were familiar to him. He recognized the prose style of someone who had read every gap in a previous document and written the new document specifically to close them. He had seen this prose style in the Geological Authority report correspondence that Ahmeth had sent on day 33, and in the equipment failure protocol revision she had written and distributed on day 38. "You drafted this," he said. "With the program's administrative office," she said. "It took 8 days. There was no existing category for this situation. We needed to create one." He looked at the paragraph again. He looked at the header more carefully. "This is retroactive to day 8, he said. "The program was willing to accommodate the date," she said. "The Geological Authority report carried weight with them. The report demonstrates a contribution to regional rescue operations that predates the formal arrangement, so the retroactive date is supportable." A pause. "It also means your exchange participation credit is correctly recorded." He looked up at her. "Field 17, she said before he could ask. "Professional classification. It's listed as CE7, Civilian Environmental Surveyor, correctly with a secondary cross-listing. Regional Geological Risk Analysis, Technical Specialist Grade." "Because I'm not RE7. "Because you're not RE7, she confirmed. "You are a CE7 who was sent here by a registration error and spent 6 weeks doing something more useful than waiting in auxiliary quarters." She looked at him steadily. "The error is corrected. The cross-listing is accurate. The arrangement is voluntary on both sides." He looked at the shuttle bay door. He looked at the unit arranged around the bay with the careful casualness that was not quite as casual as it was trying to be. He looked at Quell, who had stopped pretending to look elsewhere and was simply looking at him, because Quell did not pretend about things. He looked at Ahmeth. "The 220 sessions," he said. "Still separate," she said. "Still voluntary, still the good tea." He set his pack down. He set it down with the simplicity of putting something in the right place when you have found the right place. 6 months, he said. "Renewable," she said. "Third paragraph is accurate," he said. "I accept." The outer gold rings of her eyes did the thing. The warming. The thing he had finally mapped correctly on day 29 at 400 in the analysis room. The thing that was not contraction at all but its opposite. An opening of some quality that he did not yet have a word for in his own language and suspected did not need one. From somewhere near the equipment bay wall, Krell said something to Yavith in Velakari, too fast for his translator, but with the cadence of a calculation arriving at a confirmed result. He would ask her what it meant later. He thought she would tell him. "Come back inside," Ahmeth said. "I'll make tea." "The good kind," he said. "The good kind," she agreed. He picked his pack up and followed her in. Behind him the unit began, with varying degrees of subtlety, to also come back inside. The shuttle bay door closed. The shuttle departed on schedule. Davin Crew's departure was not recorded in any of the unit's operational logs, because he did not depart, and the log was accurate. The intake form for the extended in-field consultation posting, Category 4, had 31 fields. He filled all 31 of them correctly. He read it twice, caught one potential ambiguity in field 19, confirmed it was not in fact ambiguous, and submitted it at 16:14 on day 42, 11 minutes after returning from the shuttle bay. The counter-signature came back from Ahmeth at 16:25. He went back to the analysis room and pulled up the thread he had found the previous evening. A secondary calibration question in the southern zone, surveys that the Geological Authority's response had flagged as worth investigating, and began to read. At 22:14, Ahmeth appeared in the doorway with the good tea. She sat in the second chair. "New thread," she said. "Southern zone," he said. "Different error type, related family." "Show me," she said. He showed her. She asked a question at the first branch point, the right question. the one that went for the foundation, and he answered it, and the thread continued, and the outpost was quiet around them, and outside the plateau was dark and the stars were a configuration he was still learning. At 500, the thread reached its natural end for the evening. "Good thread," she said. "Very good thread," he said. She looked at him with the amber gold eyes in the quiet light of the analysis room, the state he had finally mapped, present at its fullest. She did not look away. He did not look away. "I'm glad the registration was wrong," she said. He thought about field 22 of the original form, and the correct Kellen 3 asterisk, and the software patch applied 4 hours before his midnight submission, and field 48 which had not visibly existed, and all 47 fields he had read carefully and filled correctly. "I'm glad I checked field 22, he said. She looked at him for a moment, the look of someone who has received information that is simultaneously very specific and says something much larger. Then something moved in the outer rings of her eyes, the warm open quality at its fullest, and he thought that was a sufficient answer, and that he had enough data now to act on it, and so he did. The analysis room was quiet, the thread was complete, the tea was warm. Outside, the plateau held its geological secrets in the dark, and they were not going anywhere, and neither was he.